In this video, we're going to study about alteration of share capital. At the very outset, I'd like to clarify that this video is about alteration of share capital and not a related topic, which is variation of shareholders' rights. So now that we're clear what this video is about and what it's not about, let's dive straight into the topic. So here I have reproduced an example from the ICAP study text for CAF 3. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through an example which involves alteration of share capital. Just remember that to contrast this particular example that we're discussing in this video, I'd like to point out that here there is no increase or decrease in the quantity of shares, and neither is there any decrease or increase in the total authorized capital of the company. So as you can see, I have highlighted certain parts of this particular example, and two phrases in particular would stand out immediately. So before you even start reading the entire text that's in front of you, I'd like to draw your attention to those two underlined points, that is the first one in red. So without reading anything else, these two particular lines read as follows: an authorized ordinary share capital of rupees 500 million. This is the line at the beginning, that is the first one. And then the third last line reads as follows: the authorized share capital of the company is rupees 500 million. What this essentially means is that the before and after situation is not going to involve any increase or decrease in the total authorized share capital of the company. On the other hand, what is going to change is the fact that at the moment, in the beginning, originally, the company only has one kind of share capital, and that is ordinary share capital. And later on, as you will see, once the company makes the changes in the share capital clause of the Memorandum of Association, then after making the relevant change, what's going to happen is that the company is then going to have two kinds of share capital. So previously, where it had only one kind, that is ordinary share capital, now it's going to have two kinds, that is ordinary as well as preference shares. So these are the two main points that I wanted to highlight before we deal with this example in detail. And now I'm going to deal with this example in detail, one point at a time. Okay, so first and foremost, like I always do, I'm going to quickly read through what I have in the slide right here. So ABC Private Limited has got an authorized ordinary share capital of rupees 500 million, which is divided into 50 million ordinary shares, that is the quantity of shares of rupees 10 each. Out of total authorized capital of rupees 200 million is already paid up. The company, if so resolves in the general meeting, may subdivide the unissued authorized capital into preference and ordinary shares by stating in the authorized capital clause of the memorandum that the authorized capital of the company is rupees 500 million divided into 25 million ordinary shares for rupees 10 each and 25 million preference shares of rupees 10 each. Now once again, please look at the slide where I have highlighted, this time in green, two particular points. First one is the phrase where it says 50 million ordinary shares, that is the third line, and then the second last and the very last line which says first 25 million ordinary shares and then 25 million preference shares. So the reason I've highlighted these 2 points in green is to again reiterate and highlight the fact that initially the company had 50 million ordinary shares, that is just one kind of shares, and the total quantity of shares was 50 million. And then later on, even after they make the change, as you can see that the total quantity of shares is going to be 25 million plus 25 million is equals to 50 million shares. So essentially, like I said in the beginning, there is no increase or decrease in the quantity of shares. So later on, after making the change, what's happening is that the shares are now divided, that is subdivided into two kinds, and initially we just had one kind, that is ordinary shares. All all of them were ordinary shares, that is 50 million ordinary shares, but now we have 25 million ordinary shares and 25 million preference shares. Also, just one more point that I want you to notice is that this time in blue color I've highlighted the value of each share, which is rupees 10 each. So as you can see, at the beginning the value was rupees 10 each, and later on, after making the change, the value still stays the same, that is rupees 10 per share. So the face value of the share, that is the nominal value, or it's also known as the par value, and I do talk about the different kinds of values, that is face value versus market value and so on, in another video. But for now, just remember that there is also no increase or decrease in the value of the shares. Okay, so now that we've discussed these basic points, I want you to have a look at this picture and the one that follows this one. And once you break down the text into an image like the one that I have shown on the screen here, you'll see that the process of understanding is going to be much easier once you visualize the information in this way. Okay, so here you can see that this deals with the before situation, that is the original situation where the company had not made any alteration to their share capital. And by the way, here SC stands for share capital, which is pretty obvious, but just in case you didn't know. So at the beginning, the authorized share capital was just 50 million shares, that is worth rupees 500 million, and all of those were just ordinary shares, and ordinary is the one word that I have kept in red so that you can see it clearly. And initially that authorized share capital, that is of rupees 500 million, was divided into paid up issued share capital. By the way, paid up is just issued share capital. So it was divided into paid up, that is issued share capital of rupees 200 million on the one hand, and on the right side you can see that there was the leftover unissued share capital of rupees 300 million, that is 30 million shares. So 20 plus 30 million is obviously 50 million shares, which is the total share capital of the company originally. And this picture now represents the after situation, which is after the company had made the alteration to their share capital. So here you can see that the authorized share capital is no longer just the ordinary share capital. That is, in the first heading you can see that the authorized share capital is simply rupees 500 million, and over here we don't have the word ordinary written the way it was written in the earlier slide. Why? Because previously all of the authorized share capital was just of one kind, that is ordinary share capital, but now the entire authorized share capital of rupees 500 million has been subdivided into two kinds, that is ordinary and preference shares. And the ordinary shares you can see now are rupees 250 million, and the preference shares are worth rupees 250 million as well, so they are equally divided into these two kinds. And now we have 25 million shares, that is the quantity of 25 million shares of ordinary shares, and 25 million preference shares. And then of course this time all of the preference shares are unissued as yet. So over here you can see that the preference shares are clearly mentioned as all unissued, and that is still 25 million shares, which is worth rupees 250 million. However, as far as the ordinary shares are concerned, those are now further subdivided, because as you can remember from the earlier situation that 200 million shares, that is rupees 200 million, were already paid up, that is issued share capital. So obviously all that we're left with as far as the ordinary shares are concerned is the remaining 5 million shares, and that, as you can see in the picture, is represented in the second image below the ordinary shares. That is, ordinary shares are now subdivided into either paid up, that is issued shares, which is rupees 200 million, and the unissued share capital, which is worth rupees 50 million. So hopefully the picture is going to help you understand. And now there is another picture which is going to clarify things further, and this is just another way of looking at it, by the way, in case this way it was not that clear to you. So if you focus just on the ordinary share capital, that is the rupees 250 million as was given in the text earlier that I had shared, where it was clearly stated that the company has subdivided its share capital into two equal parts, that is ordinary and preference shares, and rupees 250 million was for the ordinary shares. So if you focus on that bit and now look at this picture, you can see that the ordinary the ordinary shares that is worth rupees 250 million is either the paid up or issued share capital, which is worth rupees 200 million, as was originally the case. Why? Because rupees 200 million worth of shares had already been issued and paid up in the original situation, so that is something that is not changing in the new situation either. However, now that we have two kinds of shares, that is ordinary as well as preference shares, we have to remember that the ordinary shares are subdivided into up to only rupees 250 million. So obviously, since 200 million out of the 250 is already paid up, so what's left over is obviously just 50 million. That is rupees 50 million worth of ordinary share capital which is still unissued, and that of course represents 5 million shares that are still among the unissued share capital. So just to repeat once more, that out of the 25 million ordinary shares, 20 million have been issued and the remaining is 5 million shares which is part of the unissued share capital, but these are all ordinary shares that we are talking about. And now here is just one more possible way of looking at it, and this one is probably going to be the easiest one to understand, because this time we're focusing on all of the unissued share capital. So originally, if you remember, it was stated that the company had 200 million rupees worth of issued share capital, so that leaves us with rupees 300 million of unissued share capital, right? And I want you to have a very quick look at the sixth line where I have underlined the word, so not underlined, but it's in red, the word subdivide in the sixth line, and this is the same slide that I had shared earlier at the beginning of this video. So here it's clearly written that the company subdivides the unissued authorized capital into preference and ordinary shares. And so coming back to this particular diagram that I was talking about, so you can see very simply that if you divide the unissued share capital, you get further two subdivisions of unissued share capital, but this time the unissued share capital is of two types, not just of one type. So out of the rupees 300 million worth of unissued share capital, we have rupees 50 million worth of unissued ordinary share capital and rupees 250 million worth of unissued preference share capital. So just do the basic math, and 50 million plus 250 million is equal to rupees 300 million worth of the entire unissued share capital. So to conclude, this video was about alteration of share capital, and in this particular video we saw how the share capital can be altered. So initially the company just had ordinary share capital, but now it has ordinary as well as preference shares.